Welcome to Unleash the Awesome with Dave Gambrill. All of us have unique skills, talents, and abilities that aren't being used to their full potential. Our mission is to share the people, tools, apps, and other resources that will help you unleash your awesome on the world.
Yo, what's up? It's Dave. Welcome to another episode of Unleash the Awesome. And yeah, it's really me. Today we're going to talk about what layoffs, big layoffs, and a recession should remind us to all focus on, because there's some things that we could be doing that will set ourselves up for success in any market condition. And yes, it is actually me. I already alluded to that, but if you don't know what I'm talking about, make sure you go listen to my last episode where I talked about artificial intelligence tools. It's kind of mind-blowing, actually. I'll make sure the link for that is in the comments. But let's jump into today's conversation about what recessions and big layoffs should remind us to do. And I did an episode on this, I think back in November of 2022, where I called it Work Harder on Yourself Than You Do on Your Job. And I got into this a little bit, but I'm going to give you some more specificity today on things that I would focus on. These are things that I focused on when I was in a corporate environment, when I had a job and I was trying to move up and, get hired and promoted and things like that. And these are the things that I recommended to people when I worked in an HR capacity in a talent development organization. These are the things that I still share with people now. These are the things I tell my kids to do. These are the things I share with people I coach and I mentor. And so, I don't know, maybe there's some value in these, maybe not. It'll be up to you to decide that. But one of the things I would really focus on is continuing education and lifelong learning, and focusing on the things I'm going to talk about today, in particular, in order of priority about how I talk about them, because I think some of these things are super important. And the idea is that if you learn this stuff and get good at it and you enhance your skills, these are transferable pretty much to anything else that you find yourself doing, right? What a lot of people get stuck doing is working on one specific skill or one specific niche, and then the industry or the economy changes, and then that person is out of a job. I think about a typewriter repair person, right? Don't need a whole lot of those anymore. And so, and with trends that are happening, artificial intelligence and things like that, there are probably some roles right now that are potentially going to get eliminated or merged with some of the things. So there's lots of stuff you have to pay attention to as it relates to learning, lifelong learning, and focusing on yourself. And as Jim Rohn says, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. So if I was going to focus on some skills, some things that I needed to get better at, and this is what I recommend people do because it transfers really, really well pretty much to any role you'll be in, whether you're going to work a job or you want to be an entrepreneur. And this assumes in this conversation that you already have some domain expertise. You already are working or have some ability to do whatever it is you do. That's why domain expertise will not be first. Yeah? So this assumes you kind of already have a role. And the problem here too, again, before I get into the list, is if you look at Eisenhower matrix of time prioritization or time management, I'll put a link to that in the show notes so you can take a look at it. But there's one quadrant where you should probably spend more time than you do, and it's the important but not urgent category. And that's exactly what this skill enhancement and learning thing is, right? It's not super urgent. And so often it gets put off. And I'm telling you, if you want to be successful in this world, you need to personally prioritize this, whether your boss or your manager or your organization prioritizes it or not. If you want to continue to be marketable and employable and promotable, or you want to go out and have your own company, you have to make sure that you focus and prioritize on this learning, okay? All right, the first thing I would focus on is communication skills, both writing and speaking. There's some artificial intelligence tools now that will help you with stuff like that, like Jasper and Grammarly and Compose.ai and a whole bunch of other things. They'll help you on the written side, but the problem becomes if you don't know what good communication is, then you don't know what it looks like or doesn't look like when you get an output from some artificial intelligence, right? So a lot of that stuff is still in a garbage in, garbage out phase, where if you don't know how to ask the request properly, then you're not going to get anything that's really good. And if you don't know what you're doing, you won't know that it's good, and you'll pass that off as good. And people will say, wow, that dude's an idiot, right? Because you don't know what you're doing. So focus on writing, being clear in your writing, how to write proper emails, things like that. And there's plenty of opportunities. I'm not going to call out, specific things, but LinkedIn has like LinkedIn Learning, and there's Masterclass, and there's all these things you could be doing to enhance your skills, all kinds of courses you could take online. I'm not going to recommend anything in particular, but I'm sure even your own organization probably has some ongoing learning things. So I would focus on the writing piece and then the speaking piece. So can you give presentations? Maybe go join a Toastmasters organization. That's a really inexpensive way to get better at public speaking. And not only public speaking, but if you're in the corporate space, like how do you present in front of your peers? How do you do a PowerPoint presentation? Hopefully you're not one of those people that for a 10-minute PowerPoint has 300 slides and you read every slide, right? Oh my gosh, that's so bad. Don't do that, but I'm sure you have some peers that do that. And maybe you currently do that. So get better and work on those things. How do you give a corporate presentation? And how do you write an email? And here, I'll give you one example of like how to write in a fast-paced environment, how to send an email to people, especially if they're in your leadership chain of command. This is something you'll learn in the military. It's called BLUF. Bottom line up front, BLUF, bottom line up front. In the subject line or in the first sentence of your email, put, hey, this is what this is about, and it may require action, blah, blah, blah. And then put the supporting stuff underneath it. So people that are super busy can read it and go like, oh, this does not apply to me, because a lot of times in corporate America, people send emails just to cover their ass, right? They BCC and CC everybody in the organization just to be like, hey, look at me, I'm doing my job. Let me justify my existence. When in reality, you probably didn't need to receive that email. So if they would put the BLUF there, bottom line up front, you could decide whether or not you need to do anything with that. Okay, so writing and speaking, right? Communication skills, that would be the first thing I would be focusing on, and working on enhancing nonstop, right? I still to this day do it. Even though I've been through a number of courses and certifications and things like that, I still focus on it and try to get better at it every day. The second one would be sales, or maybe we call it influence. Because no matter what you do, you're selling, right? Maybe you're not selling a physical product. Maybe you're not selling a service. Maybe you're not actually in a sales role, but every day you sell or influence. If you want a good book to read on this, go read To Sell is Human by Dan Pink. Really awesome. I'll put a link in the show notes for you. That gives you some idea around how we're selling every day and the things you need to think about as you're doing it. Because maybe you're selling an idea to your boss, or you're selling an idea to your peers, or you're selling an idea to your kids that they need to finish the vegetables that are on their plate. Like whatever it is, we're selling and influencing all day, every day. And honestly, people have an icky feeling about sales. A lot of people that are not in the sales environment and don't understand that selling is service. And so you kind of got to get over that, and you got to learn how to sell and influence and persuade. Another great book is Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Dr. Robert Cialdini. And I actually got him, I can't believe it, I persuaded him to come onto my podcast not too long ago, and we had a good conversation around these now 7 levers of influence that he writes about in his book. I'll make sure the link to that episode is in the show notes for you. You might want to go listen. It's really good. It'll give you a jump start if you're focusing on getting better with your sales and influence, right? So it'll be the second thing. First one would be communication. Second one would be sales and influence. The third thing I would focus on learning, because again, all this stuff is transferable, is productivity and project management. So how can you get better, more efficient at what you do, right? Assuming what you're doing is effective, right? A lot of people are worried about being efficient at things that don't really matter. I'm assuming here that what you're doing is effective and you have some things working. Now, how can you get better and more efficient at it? Again, I did an episode on this podcast about how I use a tool called Trello and this idea called Kanban methodology. Basically, it's just 3 basic columns. There's other columns in there, but to do, doing, and done. And that's how I track my projects. And if I need to add other people to it, and you can put checklists in there and things like that. But I learned that methodology as I was doing lifelong learning and focusing on this stuff when I worked for a software company, when they actually use this methodology with the development of the software. And while I didn't work with the developers and the programmers for specifically developing the software, I did work with them from a talent development standpoint. And this conversation would come up a lot in classes and stuff I'd be teaching, and they would talk about it. I'm like, that's really interesting. I want to learn more. So I had some people in there give me a quick rundown on what it is and how it works and how they use it. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I went on who knows what site, referenced it, looked it up, found a course that I could take. It was probably at the time lynda.com, which I think is now LinkedIn Learning or Microsoft Learning, whatever. And I'm like, you know what? I can figure out ways to apply this to what I do. So to this day, like every day, I still use this methodology, right, to do what I need to do. And I even introduced it to my family, and my kids use it. And when we're tracking our kids' college application process or acceptance process or things like that, big life events, or when I have big projects for things around the house, like if we're getting home repairs or improvements done, things like that, where I need to bring in a bunch of contractors or I'm trying to track a bunch of bids and things like that. I use the stuff that I learned through focusing on productivity and project management, right? There's lots of other ways you can do it. There's lots of other tools you can use. Find something that you like and get better at it. All right, so communication, sales and influence, productivity and project management. The fourth one, and again, I'm listing these what I think are order of priority. The fourth one would be leadership. And some people would disagree that I put it at number 4, but hear me out for a second. If you don't have all that other stuff in place, if you can't communicate, if you can't sell or influence, if you don't know how to manage projects and things like that, it's kind of hard to lead, because a lot of the qualities of a good leader involve leading from the front and doing things a certain way and being efficient and effective and showing people how it's done and modeling the way. And if you don't do those other things well, it's hard to do, right? Leadership, good leaders need to cast a vision and communicate that vision to people. Again, if you don't know how to communicate written or spoken word, you're going to have problems with that. So focus on leadership, right? Many of you know that I have a relationship with John Maxwell, the world's foremost leadership expert. I was a founding member of his leadership program that he has. He's written a ton of books. You can go read any of them. If you want to start with one, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership is a good one. But he's got lots of books and stuff you can read on leadership, and there's plenty of other leadership books and quote gurus out there. But get better at that and understand how that works, right? Another really good one is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, because if you can lead in a military environment, you can pretty much lead anywhere. Okay, so that would be the fourth one. Now, the fifth one is domain expertise. All right, so what is it that you do, and can you focus on getting better than that? So if you're an analyst, a business analyst or something like that, supply chain analyst, whatever, can you get better with Excel? Could you get better with doing pivot tables? Could you get better with doing forecasting? Could you get better with, stuff like that, like paying attention specifically to your domain? And the reason why I have it listed here all the way down at 5 is because, again, I'm assuming that you already have some domain expertise. And a lot of organizations, if you're in that role, they're going to have continuing education and they're going to teach you the stuff you need to do the job anyway. You're not really going to have to proactively go do this. Now, if you want to be better than your peers and you are in an environment where they do forced ranking for promotions, which I think is BS, forced ranking. But anyway, if you're in an environment like that and you got to be better than your peers, then just 1 or 2 little courses on this, 1 or 2 little classes on Coursera or LinkedIn Learning or whatever. I'm getting a little better, and then bringing that to the next meeting. And then if you're working on all the things I talked about and your communication skills, and you have to present at a meeting, and you present on something, and you present on something new that you learned in the space that can make you more efficient and effective, because we talked about that already, and it's part of your domain expertise, then you start to become somebody who is super valuable to that organization. And it would be really hard in a layoff situation to get rid of you, because you are providing so much value now, right? And you've added this little extra domain experience or expertise piece of it, right? So that would be the fifth thing that I would focus on. And then the last thing, and there's probably other things out there, but just broadly speaking, the last thing I would be paying attention to, but still paying attention to it, is new technology, apps, things that are trending, whether in your market or the industry in general. And I think a good example right now would be artificial intelligence, right? That's a broad name for a lot of crazy, amazing things that are out there right now. There's so many things that artificial intelligence is touching on. And it's actually touching on all of the things I've talked about already, including leadership, right? But productivity and product management, there's lots of apps that help you get better with your calendar that use artificial intelligence to kind of move things around on your calendar, help you prioritize things. Obviously with sales and influence, and there's copywriting artificial intelligence things, and it's just amazing. And again, if you didn't listen to my last episode that I did on artificial intelligence, I think it's called Embracing Artificial Intelligence in Your Life and Business. It's only 5 minutes long, but you should really go listen to it because I did something kind of crazy in that episode. But that would be something like I would be paying attention to. Even though right now as I'm doing this episode in February of 2022, it's, cryptocurrency seems to be not so popular because it's kind of in a bear market, but I would still be telling people to be focused on, and I did an episode on this earlier too, about not crypto on the top level, but like what is the underlying technology that's making that happen? The secure, the contracts on the blockchain, right? Those are things that I might be paying attention to, because if you start leaning into this new stuff, if you start seeing how artificial intelligence is applicable to your industry, your domain in particular, maybe some of these other things, and again, you start bringing this back to the organization and you start making enhancements with what you're doing or what your department is doing or whatever, then you're setting yourself up to be a really invaluable resource there at that organization. And one, it would be great to get you promoted or get you a raise. And two, it'd be really hard to get rid of you in a downsizing situation because you're so valuable to the organization. So that's what you're trying to do here. Make yourself more marketable, not only inside the organization, but I think if you learn these things in this priority, what it helps you do is any of this stuff then is transferable to another role, even if you go to another niche or domain. Like I have jumped from so many different industries. I was in professional sports and entertainment doing sales and marketing. I was in technical recruiting. I've been in selling drugs out of the back of my car, legally, of course, for a pharmaceutical company for like 12 years. And even in that role, I did some teaching and training. And then I worked in a software company doing talent development and leadership training and things like that. So like those are all kind of different. But the things that remain the same were the first four things I talked about: my communication skills, my sales and influence skills, my productivity and project management, my leadership. Those are all things I could bring with me to any of those roles. Now, obviously, domain expertise was different, right? There was things I did on a day-to-day basis that were way different in my pharmaceutical sales and marketing job than even in my professional sports sales and marketing job, even though it was a sales marketing role, right? But it was different. So I was able to jump from thing to thing to thing. And now as an entrepreneur, I'm applying a lot of that stuff with what I do on a daily basis, including the production and marketing of this podcast, right? And I'm using the new technology and apps and trending things like that to help me be more efficient and effective, to keep my team lean, right? So I can have fatter margins in my business and be successful. So I think if you focus on these, to review in order: communication, both writing and speaking; sales or influence; productivity and project management; leadership, domain expertise; and then new technology or trending tools, apps, things like that. I know without a shadow of a doubt, when you do that, it will help you unleash your awesome, not only in your current role, but whatever role you decide to go take on later. See ya.
Thanks for listening to Unleash the Awesome. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please share us on your favorite social media platforms using #UnleashAwesome.